In Blackpool, emergency services are called out to a fire in an alleyway.
Some neighbours had seen some smoke and they see what appears to be, they think, a mannequin initially. Once the flames have been extinguished, it is apparent that this isn't a mannequin, but it's a human body that's been burnt.
The body was in a fetal position, partially closed, wrapped in a carpet. We don't know who that body is, we don't know anything about it.
The most obvious reason for burning a body is to destroy evidence. It is possible that there are other reasons too, the kind of total annihilation and disrespect of that victim.
Every crime scene tells a story. As a CSI and a crime scene manager, our job is to put yourself in the mindset of a killer. This is a horrific, sadistic attack on a child who has come to the area and committed such an awful crime.
Where the body's been placed, it's a small dead-end road. It's old-fashioned cobble streets, being from up north from Yorkshire, recognise those kind of streets. So you'd have to be local to understand that is down there. So someone with local knowledge would know that's a place to hide something.
CSIs are called in.
In my mind, this looks like a deposition site rather than an actual attack site. They've attacked the victim somewhere else, deposited the body in the alleyway, and then they've set fire to the body because they know that fire is likely to destroy quite a bit of evidence. You're either looking for an attack site quite close by or a vehicle that's been used to transport this deceased to this location.
There's nowhere to cut through there. So if a vehicle drove in there, it'd be quite obvious. It's visible to other people within the street and also from the back of the guest houses as well. If they've walked there, we need to look at the houses and immediate properties around the actual dumping site.
Officers go door to door as the team focuses on identifying the victim. But the body is wrapped in bin bags, bedding and carpet.
In order to identify the victim at the scene, without compromising the forensics, we would do an initial examination of immediate around the victim and the scene, see what's been dumped there, what's on the person, ID cards, anything like that.
If you've got a body wrapped, the SIO wants to know who the body is, but we need to preserve the evidence.
The priorities for me on the forensic evidence is firstly, identify her, get the DNA and what can we match that DNA with. Is there DNA on the database? If not, what other evidence do we have there? Can we get fingerprints of the victim? If not, then we need to secure the evidence that we have with the victim or from the victim, take it to the mortuary, and then we do a more thorough examination.
The body appears to be a partially clothed teenage girl.
It's a cold, wet January evening. It's a priority to actually get the body removed from the scene and into the mortuary, so it's a little bit more of a controlled environment.
Blackpool is very transient. The community is very small and very intimate. Everybody knows each other, so you want to give people answers, but at the same time without compromising the investigation. So you've got to be phased in what kind of information you give out to the public, especially through the media. So it's a massive, massive amount of pressure.
Blackpool's a little bit different from the rest of Lancashire in some ways because it's a holiday town. It's a really popular place for people to come and have fun. They come and spend time on the beach, in the arcades, make memories with their families. To have a murder like this just a stone's throw from all the attractions is really horrific. It's going to be front page news, so we need to find out as much as we can about what's happened.
These are crimes that signal to people that all is not well. If it's a stranger attack late at night, then you might think, well, that can happen to me or my family or my loved ones. You know, there's all these kind of things that go on in people's minds that feed into their fears, I think.
Who's done it? Who committed such an awful crime? There's a lot of speculation. The victim hasn't been identified at this point. Often there's names being thrown about that may or may not be true. Obviously, we can't confirm anything until the family have been informed.
With CSI still searching for forensic leads, detectives trawl through missing persons reports to identify the teenager.
What search parameters can we go with? With very little information, it would be initially very difficult, especially if that person was missing from a different area.
Just 2 hours into the investigation, police receive a call from a worried local family.
And our information comes to us that there's a young lady gone missing. Supposed to come home that evening after being to a new job, but never returned home. Her description linked to the victim found.
16-year-old Sasha Marsden has been missing for several hours.
My mum were trying to ring her, messaging her, none of the messages were going through. Time went on, still couldn't get hold of her. Even then, she wasn't overly worried because Sasha was known for doing what she wanted to do. It got to about 11 o'clock at night when my mum said, I'm going to have to report her missing. And then the police came to the house, and that was when we knew that something was really wrong.
Police in Blackpool investigating the murder of a teenager in an alleyway suspect it's 16-year-old Sasha Marsden. It's been 7 hours since Sasha was last seen or spoken to.
There's always going to be that hope, isn't there? Has she caught up with a friend? Has she gone to McDonald's? Has her phone run out of battery? Is she just late? And is she just going to walk through the door?
My mum was pacing and she started saying how body's been found in an alleyway, matching the description of Sasha.
To receive that news it's unimaginable. Really is unimaginable.
It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. The family want information. You want to give the family as much information as possible because their world has just fallen apart. But all you can do is give them the news. If you're proven wrong, well, okay, we'll deal with that afterwards. But all the evidence suggests that she is the victim in the alleyway.
We were all still clinging on to the hope it wasn't Sasha. We didn't believe for a second it was Sasha.
Detectives still need to forensically identify the teenager.
They just said, could we have a toothbrush that only Sasha used so we could extract her DNA off it to match that up to the body that we've got.
Toothbrush is used as what the police would call an ante-mortem sample. So this is where we suspect that the victim of a crime is deceased and they're not known on the fingerprint database or the DNA database. Toothbrushes are very good for DNA samples. Some of the bristles would be cut off and then the DNA would be extracted from those bristles. So I'm going to remove some of the bristles using some clean tweezers and a clean scalpel and cut them, and then I'm going to place them in a clean universal pot.
As they await the results, detectives look into Sasha's life.
It's important to understand the victimology. Who is that victim? What is their patterns? What is their habits? How has that person ended up here? So we want to know their life ins and out of it. Who the friends are, if she's got any boyfriends, does she part of social media, does she have a phone? Something that leaves an electronic footprint then allows the investigation team to basically narrow down the searches of CCTV and see who she has been meeting and where she went from there.
Sasha's phone is missing.
If you don't have the victim's phone, it can be quite challenging. If you're looking for just cell site data, you don't physically need the phone. But if you're looking for text messages, then it's handy to have.
Detectives ask Sasha's family if she's in any trouble.
She had an attitude, but she was 16. You tell me a 16-year-old girl that didn't. She was always protective of people that she cared about. So she was constantly getting into like drama with her friends, little Facebook arguments. It could have been something to do with that. It could have just been a stranger. We had all sorts of scenarios in our head that what it could be. We moved into like a little village called Staining. It was a little bit boring in Staining, so we would get on the bus and we'd go into Blackpool Town Centre, where obviously you've got the arcades and everything else. But it's not safe. There is people looking for teenage children to exploit.
This time of the year was winter. It was January, out of season, it's quiet. A lot of places closed down, a lot of places doing refurbishing, redecorating for the next season. So what you don't have is the regular seasonal holidaymakers, and the transient workers that you may have had during the summer have moved away. You're just going to have the core people that are in the area now. So you have to focus on potentially somebody that's local.
In cases like this, the prime suspect would be somebody that was already connected to the victim, and particularly if there was a boyfriend or an intimate sexual partner, and the police would, want to interview that person, and if they started to think that it wasn't them, then they would look to eliminate the suspect.
With the help of Sasha's family, detectives urgently pieced together her last known movements.
She'd been at college that day. Sasha was studying childcare. She wanted to work with kids. She loved kids. She'd already completed the work and progressed on to the next level. She'd finally found what she wanted to do and finally got herself together and was going for it.
After college, Sasha's dad picks her up and takes her into Blackpool city centre to start a new cleaning job.
Sasha had been offered a job on Facebook. She'd met this guy before with a friend outside Coral Island. She didn't remember him, but he'd approached her on Facebook and then reminded her who he was and asked if she wanted to come to the hotel. Sasha was really excited for the job. It was coming up to Valentine's Day, and she really wanted to take her boyfriend to an all-you-can-eat buffet for his Valentine's Day present. So she went on her first day. That was on the Monday. She had an induction, and she come away with £10 and arranged to go back on the Thursday. She told her dad that she'd message him when she was ready to be picked up, so we were just waiting for that message. Obviously time went on and we're like, well, she was only there just over an hour last time.
As evening falls, Sasha still hasn't been in touch. At 8:30, her parents, Jane and Gary, go to look for her, starting at the hotel.
Time was getting on and they were getting quite worried about her. They drove down there and knocked on the door to ask where Sasha was. He said that she'd left.
The deposition site is at the rear of the hotel. Who's the person that she met at that hotel? Did she arrive at work? Did she leave work? That hotel is now the team's focus.
Officers ask to see Sasha's Facebook messages.
From there, the officer were able to identify who she was communicating with and where the work was and the tone of the messages as well. The sender kept on asking Sasha to come there on her own. Officers became concerned. Why is an adult male asking for a young girl to come on her own? It wasn't just in one message, it was several messages. Making sure she's on her own, that's a red flag straight away. That's very suspicious. Predatory to a certain extent. And also it's out of season, so why would it be recruiting staff out of season? Somebody needs to be spoken to as soon as possible.
The man is identified as 22-year-old David Minto.
That person is the last person that's seen the victim alive. You look at what his social media is like, you look at what his profile is like.
Digital forensic experts find that online he uses the name Demon.
They were concerned about, firstly, his name, Demon, or a nickname of Demon, which is a little bit strange, but also a lot of his friends were young females of the same age as Sasha.
Detectives speak to David Minto at the hotel, where he lives with his girlfriend. He tells them he spent the afternoon alone.
We already know that the victim's at the back of the property. We know that he's been in communications with her. Her parents have been to the address, and he's already told them that she's been here, but then left. Officers attend, and now he's denying it. Would that be cause to arrest him on the spot? Yeah.
In custody, he refuses to answer any further questions.
The most common thing for suspects to do in arrests in homicide cases is to say nothing, actually. To deny involvement is the most usual. You know, there's very few cases where a suspect will say, yes, it was me, and here's all the grisly details about what I did.
The next day, the results of the DNA testing confirmed Sasha's family's worst fears.
I think we were still in disbelief because we wasn't allowed to see her. They said that it would be too traumatic and that she was not identifiable. She didn't look like Sasha anymore. From our perspective, Sasha's not come home, and we've got some strangers in our house saying she's dead. We were waiting for Sasha to walk in through that door and give her a good telling off for having us all worried. She had the biggest heart, and she was just caring. She loved spending time with her family, though. She definitely put in a lot of effort with people. She loved so hard, and she was just the best friend that you could ask for.
The team still needs to determine where Sasha was attacked. Detectives secure a warrant to carry out a forensic search of the hotel.
Once you walk into a crime scene, there's always different things you take into account. Evidence is not going to be obvious. You're looking for the invisible. The most obvious thing is the smell.
There's an instant recognition of bleach and of cleaning product smells in that hotel. It looks like there's been a cleanup operation. That would ring alarm bells with the police and the CSIs.
You know, he's living in a hotel that's otherwise empty, to a premises that he can control. He could invite somebody there that was vulnerable and then, you know, not fear that anybody was going to come along and interrupt them.
How do you start looking at a scene like that for an attack site? Clearly you're going to start looking for blood or any damage in a room, etc. But searching a big property like that is a very arduous task and can take a long time.
To focus the search, CSIs refer to the post-mortem results. The pathologist finds Sasha has been raped and stabbed over 50 times in the head and neck. Her cause of death is catastrophic blood loss.
Being stabbed over 50 times, that's a frenzied attack. That's someone that has been fighting for their life.
I had all sorts of visions in my head. It's such a brutal, gruesome murder that actually it's more something out of a horror film, and you don't expect that to happen to somebody that you know.
It just tells us that there was overkill, whether that was because he was angry, whether he just enjoyed inflicting that much pain. The suspect sexually assaulted the victim, and obviously from the police point of view points to a particular kind of offender with, you know, abnormal sexual fantasies and desires.
Male DNA is recovered from Sasha's remains and sent for profiling. At the hotel, CSIs continue to search for the attack site.
50 stab wounds would cause a lot of blood and a lot of blood spatter. There must be a scene that's heavily bloodstained. Even if someone's tried to clear it up, there still would be some traces there. We would check under the carpets, under the floorboards. Police search teams would literally rip that scene apart looking for potential traces of blood. Sometimes we use chemicals to try and enhance where a scene's been cleaned up. So there's a chemical called luminol that detects trace levels of blood, so blood that's been diluted by washing.
The male DNA recovered from Sasha's body returns a partial match to David Minto.
It's not definitive, however, it's another piece. When he was confronted with the DNA evidence, he changed his story. He made a prepared statement through his solicitor. He alleged that Sasha came to work there, she did a cleaning job. During the shift, she threw herself at him and they had consensual sex, and then she had a nosebleed and then left, which is a little bit strange. I think it's just trying to prime the police investigation, because the police will turn around and say, well, actually, we found blood there. There is blood there. Well, yeah, she's had a nosebleed. And you can answer that back.
What many suspects will do in these kinds of cases is once they're presented with compelling evidence, then they will find a way to talk out of that.
Suspects will come up with some sort of alibi. You listen to what they're saying, but you listen to the evidence. So what's that telling you? And you can close down their alibis. What we need to do now is tear it apart. Absolutely, literally tear it apart.
The forensic teams used luminol in multiple areas of the hotel, and it was clear that there'd been a massive cleanup operation.
Blood traces are revealed throughout the hotel, including in the bathroom of the apartment Minto shares with his girlfriend.
His shoe marks were in blood, and then he's taken his shoes and then started walking in his socks. So there's a lot of blood there. There's a lot of blood.
At the top of the basement stairs, CSIs find the largest concentration of blood.
No nosebleed in this world would produce that amount of blood. The amount of blood that's been found fits with the pathologist report. This is the attack site. This is where Sasha has been attacked. Forensic science can prove that his story was just a load of lies. In the basement of the hotel, there's been a clean-up operation. A necklace was found in the toilet to suggest that someone's tried to get rid of the evidence, someone's tried to flush it away.
CSIs in Blackpool searching the hotel where teenager Sasha Marsden was working as a cleaner are convinced she was killed here. Extensive blood traces have been found throughout the basement and ground floor, but the team still needs to forensically link the prime suspect, David Minto, to the crime scene.
It'd be quite unusual to find blood on a necklace that's been in a toilet for a period of time. The water would potentially have washed off any blood that's on that necklace.
The back of an earring is also recovered from the bath plug hole. Sasha's family confirms the jewelry is hers. It suggests the killer was under pressure.
He didn't have time to dump anything anywhere because his girlfriend came back soon afterwards. He knows she's coming back from work at a certain time. If anything has been dumped, it's in the immediate vicinity. So you look at the bins, drains, literally within a couple hundred meters, if that, of the actual murder scene.
Finding the weapon would be a real breakthrough moment, and you would potentially be able to put the killer at that crime scene. Following the post-mortem, you would have a fairly good idea about what type of knife you'd be looking for, the length of the blade, whether it was serrated or non-serrated.
It was suggested that it was potentially a kitchen knife.
Bins would be searched quite quickly by the crime scene investigators at the scene to see if there's anything obvious that's been placed inside, for example, a weapon or an item of clothing that would be taken out and preserved. And then a further meticulous examination would be done of the bin at a later stage when the bin will be taken away from the crime scene.
At the bottom of one bin, CSIs recover a bag containing clothing matching those Sasha was last seen wearing, and her BlackBerry phone, with the battery missing.
A lot of data can be recovered from a mobile phone, so once a digital device is found, that's really important to get that fast track to the digital services.
The clothing appears to be bloodstained.
It's important to confirm whether this is blood or not. So several tests that you can do. You can use a KM test, which basically is a colour change reaction. So you just have a little piece of filter paper and you rub the corner of the filter paper on the stain. So you just need a really small amount on the tip. This is a colour change reaction with 3 different chemicals. So the first chemical goes on, which is alcohol, and then we'll use the reagent. And then the third chemical, which is hydrogen peroxide. Now this should change pink, which should show the presence of blood. So you can see that there's a pink colour that's coming up, which confirms that that is blood. A forensic lab are able to DNA profile those stains, but also a blood pattern on the clothing may help to interpret what's happened to the victim.
The blood is confirmed to be Sasha's.
Identifying the clothing at the time of the attack might help with any CCTV images earlier in the day to try and identify who she was, where she was, who she was with, was she being followed.
At 3:51 p.m., Sasha is captured following David Minto towards the hotel to start her shift. This is the last time she's seen alive.
That was hard to watch because it was the last footage of Sasha, and she's walking behind him, and the visible difference in height. It's not difficult to see how he would have overpowered her, especially with a knife. And you just want to jump into that telly and stop her going, and you can't do nothing.
In custody, Minto maintains Sasha came to work, that they had consensual sex, she had a nosebleed, then left to meet her dad. But as well as mounting forensic evidence, detectives make a sinister discovery.
Initially, he told officers that he was the owner of the property. In fact, he's the caretaker stroke barman. He doesn't have authority to recruit staff.
The hotel is owned by his girlfriend and her mum. On this day, the hotel was closed for renovations, so there wasn't even anything to be done. We know that his girlfriend and her mum were going to be out, so he's lured her there on the promise of a job that doesn't exist, completely under false pretenses.
Sasha perceived the suspect as actually a potential employer, so there was already a power imbalance really between a very young female seeking a job opportunity and a man pretending to be the hotel owner, which would have probably fed into her perceptions to trust him. It's just easier for an offender to manipulate somebody if the victim believes them to be a trusted person. It's a bit like some offenders will wear a uniform, they'll pretend to be a security guard or a police officer because, generally people will trust that person.
The team still needs forensic evidence to prove Minto planned Sasha's murder. They're hoping the recovery of her BlackBerry device will help pinpoint how quickly she was killed after arriving at the hotel. Digital forensic experts find there is no record of any outgoing calls or messages after Sasha is last seen. But an hour later, they identify suspicious activity.
So there were 2 draft messages in the BlackBerry, and those just were strange ones. You look at the messages, and we look at what a victimology is and how she communicates with other people.
Sasha had a BlackBerry, and she never topped her phone up as such. She'd top it up so she could use BlackBerry Messenger. So Sasha communicated with everybody via BBM.
But the 2 messages are drafted as standard texts.
When we looked at the phone and her history of usage, she had no credit on her phone. She's a typical 16-year-old teenager, so why would she draft these 2 messages that she couldn't send? So there's no way she could have sent those messages.
I have come across a number of cases where suspects will retain the victim's phone and they will send messages to suggest that the victim is still alive. It's normally not that difficult for the police, or certainly for family members, to realise that it's not their loved one, because normally they're written in a different way. Sometimes there's spelling mistakes or just a different language use. But it buys suspects time to clean a crime scene or to escape.
The time frame is very, very tight. She was attacked quickly when she arrived. He has to clean up quickly. He has to come up with a story quickly. He had no choice, because it's his girlfriend's mum's hotel. It's not his controlled environment.
At the hotel, searches for the murder weapon continue in the kitchens.
Possibly his girlfriend may know what knives are there, and she may ask the question, why is that knife missing?
How do you identify which knife it is? A knife used in such a vicious attack may well be damaged. One knife had a bent tip. This has been clearly used with some force.
The damaged knife is sent to the lab for closer inspection. There is no visible bloodstaining.
When a knife's been used in a murder, quite often they're cleaned down, but it's quite interesting how badly knives are cleaned. It's quite easy to clean the blade and the handle, but the area between the handle and the blade itself, you tend to get quite a lot of almost cruddy stuff there. There may well still be some DNA and some blood traces in this area here. The ideal situation would be to get the victim's blood or DNA on the blade of the knife, and then the offender's DNA or fingerprints on the handle of the knife.
Blood found on the knife returns a 1 in 1 billion DNA match for Sasha. The results confirm her blood is evident throughout the hotel, including a blood-stained glove with traces of both Sasha and David Minto's DNA.
That is just real anger. Why someone would do that to Sasha. Maybe she said no to him and she tried to fight back. Didn't like that. Did he like being in control? Did he like being in charge? And the level of force that was used against her, especially to bend the knife, it's incredible.
Minto is charged with Sasha's rape and murder. Faced with the overwhelming forensic evidence, he confesses to putting Sasha's body in the alleyway, but still insists he didn't kill her or start the fire.
His theory is that someone else has done it. When we have to present evidence to the jury, we have to be able to convince the jury that this is the only person that's committed the murder.
Minto tells police he thought Sasha had gone home when he found her dead in the hallway. In a state of shock, he says he wrapped her remains and took her out of the hotel because he has a phobia of blood.
I think there's some indication that suspects who talk to the police either think that they are cleverer than the police, that they can talk their way out of these things, or that they just kind of want to talk about it, is another possibility, because most offenders in very serious cases will take the advice of the solicitor and will go no comment.
Detectives find numerous occasions where Minto has attempted to seize control of the story to explain away incriminating evidence. Phone records show he contacted his girlfriend shortly after Sasha's remains were found.
Then he makes a strange comment saying, actually, I touched the body. So why did you touch the body? Why? He's controlling the narrative. Is he trying to deflect suspicion away from him? But he can't get away from it because the body's so close to the hotel. He has to say something. He cannot just ignore it. I think what he's saying there, or trying to do, is basically account for his DNA being on the body. Touching the body, you may have touched DNA.
Some offenders do tell a narrative to the police that they start to believe, that they convince themselves. It's much easier for them to buy into the story they've told and to kind of go along with that. It's probably a more comfortable position to be in. I think in other instances, they're lying just to try and obviously get away with the offence, and they don't believe a word of it.
What we know now is the CCTV covered the area. The teams investigated it, looked at it before, after, during, everything. There is no third party there. Her clothing's missing, so why would her clothing be missing? Which was in the bins. Her jewellery was missing, Where was that? Down the drains. So what he's been saying and using that as a defence does not match the evidence. Him claiming that he walked down the stairs and she was dead there, well, that doesn't work with the evidence. What the evidence has shown is that it's all premeditated. Everything was planned by him to lure Sasha to the hotel, to rape her. He's a predator, absolute predator through and through. There is no third party there. That murder was committed by him.
I think there's little doubt that he would have tried again if this had been unsuccessful, and if he hadn't been caught, he might have, done a repeat of this.
At his trial hearing, Minto pleads not guilty.
It doesn't matter how unbelievable your story is, if you can provide reasonable doubt, then the jury has to find you not guilty, and that's what he was trying to do, change his story to match the evidence that the police found. He's going to try and get away with this, and therefore Sasha's family are now going to have to sit through 2 weeks of awful evidence about the most horrific crime.
As summer in Blackpool returns, 23-year-old David Minto takes the stand, accused of murdering teenager Sasha Marsden.
The atmosphere in court is quite tense. There's a lot of members of the press that want to follow what's been going on. People are horrified by what's happened to this young girl just starting out in life.
There was an overwhelming amount of forensic evidence that was able to tie the offender to the murder of Sasha. There was so much blood at that scene. There was blood on the clothing. There was a knife with a bent tip. There was DNA on the knife. The perpetrator had tried to cover his tracks, tried to clean up the scene. But actually, he hasn't done a very good job. Every contact leaves a trace.
Minto admits to moving Sasha's body, but continues to claim someone else killed her.
It was horrible sitting in the same room as him, like you're yards away from him. You're not allowed to speak. You're not allowed to show emotion. And even though you're finding out all this horrible information, and he's sitting there picking his nose, like looking round like he's bored, he just didn't care. Very, very disrespectful. Not once did he refer to Sasha as a person. He referred to Sasha as it. He didn't see her as a living thing. She was just there for his sexual gratification.
When a suspect views a female as an object, not a person, I think it becomes easier for them to justify the violence against them. It's a process of kind of dehumanizing the victim and distancing himself from, the horror of what he's actually done, of course.
He believes that he's not done anything wrong. He's pleading not guilty because he believes in himself he can get away with this.
But along with the powerful forensic evidence at the crime scene, digital experts have uncovered a crucial new lead.
The team became aware of another victim who had come across the suspect, who had been offered a job as well at the hotel.
The modus operandi, how he enacted that, was very much the same to the attack on Sasha.
The woman tells police Minto attempted to sexually assault her at the hotel.
She managed to fight him off and get away. 3 weeks later, after this incident, Sasha was murdered.
Phone and computer data show that after assaulting her, Minto repeatedly contacted the woman, asking for another meeting. When finally rebutted, records show it's just minutes before he turns his attention to Sasha.
There's little doubt that he would have gone on to try a third time or a fourth time if he hadn't have been caught.
This shows how calculated Minto was. He planned this, and he planned it for some time.
There's definitely some research that suggests that some of the men that commit these serious sexual acts of violence, they themselves have had very traumatic upbringings, that they may have been abused physically, sexually, emotionally.
The court hears Minto had psychiatric problems as a child.
However, The vast majority of people who suffer those very adverse childhood experiences don't, of course, go on to commit any kind of violent offences.
What he would have learned from that first time is be more dynamic and do it straight away. He was a predator. He was going to kill at some point.
It takes the jury less than 3 hours to come to a verdict. David Minto is found guilty. He's sentenced to life with a minimum term of 35 years.
That's one of the longest sentences I've seen passed, but there are certain circumstances when somebody can be locked up for the rest of their life. There are certainly some very strong indicators in this case.
I had been hoping that Minto would get a whole life order. Sasha was 16. There was premeditation, there was clear significant suffering.
It was a horrible, sadistic sexual attack on a child.
We've never got closure. Sasha was my mum's youngest child, and my mum always called Sasha her baby. They were very, very close, my mum and Sasha. Something died in my mum that day.
After Sasha's death, her mum Jane's health declined.
A few years later, my mum suffered a really bad stroke. She lost her ability to speak. She lost a lot of her independence. And then she was diagnosed with stage 4 small cell lung cancer.
Tragically, Jane Marsden died in March 2024.
It was my mum's dying wish to make sure David Minto could never get out of jail. That was something that my mum could never accept, that her daughter's murderer could potentially one day be allowed to walk the streets again. David Minto is always going to be a danger to anybody, especially women and young girls.
Via the unduly lenient sentence scheme, Katie has requested to increase David Minto's term to a whole life order. But she's discovered it's too late.
It's got to be referred to the Court of Appeal within 28 days. If it's not done within 28 days, then the Court of Appeal cannot look at it. It's important to change this law because when families have sat through a murder trial, your heart is breaking, and it's broken into a million more pieces once you hear the details. Like, you're having to hear how deep each individual stab wound was, and then you're expected to make that decision within 28 days. We're not the only people that have tried to challenge a sentence and been told it's too late.
In her sister's memory, Katie is campaigning for Sasha's law, fighting to increase the time grieving families have to appeal an offender's sentence.
I'm just trying to get the support of the public to try and get people to sign our petition and change the law. We need 100,000 to get it debated in Parliament. Grief is real, and it needs to be considered because families can't just switch off from that. I did speak with the SIO after the whole court case, once we'd been given all the full details after the trial. She's been evidence, she's been handled by whoever does the post-mortem, and I said, I want to see my sister. So they let me go and see Sasha under a cover, and I just put my hands all over her. I touched her everywhere because everybody else had touched her there and they didn't love her. So I was touching her and putting the love there. And then I gave her a kiss on the head. Nana, I love you. And that's written on Sasha's headstone. She loved to sing and dance. She didn't care what anyone thought. Yeah, she was just cheeky.